So we're going to move to Corp 1966. Let me just go to that page. This is Councillor Nicholson, Procedure Bylaw, Section 6, Correspondence and Delegation, Corp 1966. You pulled it. Your call, sir.
Yes, you just bear with me. I'm trying to do three things at once here. Council will recall, this is not new. It's about the fourth time I think this has been here before us. Strangely enough, you may have all gotten the email on another item today, where people wanted to speak to their council with the hope of resolving an issue. And our rules said they couldn't. And that's the problem we have with our rules. We have rules that say to people, you can't speak to your council. Even if council wanted to hear from you, you can't speak to council. Makes no sense to me. Makes no sense that the council, the elected body of this community, the people that the citizens of Oshawa chose to represent them, be the trustees of their needs and guardians of tax dollars, etc., that when they want to write a letter to speak to their council, they get told they can't. Now, no other municipality in Durham Region has that rule. Region doesn't have it. The municipalities don't have it. This is a unique rule, only in Oshawa, I guess, that says citizens who pay our wages, who pay our staff's wages, who pay the taxes that keep everything functioning, don't have the right to speak to their elected representatives. And we saw today when Emilio and Mr. Lissick and others wanted to speak on a matter, they got told, nope, too bad, can't do it. Because some council, the last term, decided that for whatever reason, they didn't want to hear from these people on these issues. No, I'm not saying that this council would hear from them on every issue. Maybe we would choose not to. But the decision should be at this council, on this floor, in the minutes of this meeting, on whether someone is allowed to speak to council or not. That's called transparency. That's called accountability. That's called respect for the taxpayers. You let them make their pitch, and then you judge on its merits. The current rule, and that's why we have a small change today that says we'll allow one more category where they can actually speak, but we still going to have three others that they can't. And I'm going to support the current amendment because at least erases one of the areas of error. I will continue to fight this battle at council in the fall because I think that, with very due respect to our staff, it should never be the position of the unelected staff to decide who speaks to the elected members of council. It's unfair to staff. It's unfair to the residents. It's unfair to the council. And, you know, if you didn't want to make the decision on whether you wanted to hear somebody or not, then the only way to avoid that responsibility is not to run for the seat. With all due respect, I'm going to support Councillor Hirsch's amendment because I said that the committee is a start, but it's a very tiny step. And even the media, to their credit, have written editorials saying the previous council got it wrong and we need to make this change. But we've argued enough tonight on other issues. Let's not belabor the point. I hope you support Councillor Hirsch's amendment, and we'll deal with the rest in the fall.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a very big part that was left out in Councillor Nicholson's presentation just now, and that's the reasons why someone may not speak to council. There are all kinds of reasons why any citizen can speak to council, but there are those for the reasons of which they may not. And those reasons are labor relations. Those reasons are staff performance, ongoing legal proceedings, which what was left out of the presentation was the reason why those two citizens wanted to speak to council, but there was an appeal that had been launched, and therefore it was inappropriate to have a formal discussion about an item that is under legal appeal. That is properly not delegated to in front of council, for council to make a discussion on in front of the public. Everything else, great. Solicitation of business, no. Legal proceedings, no. Staff performance, no. Labor relations, no. So that's the important piece that's left out here. The other thing is there's a very great division between members of the public and staff members of the city of Oshawa. Now, all of a sudden now, if you're going to allow staff members of the 3 different unions that we have bypass management and present directly to council about any of these items, labor relations, staff performance, ongoing legal proceedings, whatever, then what position does that put our management in? Where those discussions rightfully happen is at the management and union level. The results of that may come to council, and council may say, yay, no, go back and do this and whatever. Council does not do the negotiations. Council does not do the staff performance. Council does not do the labor relations, the legal proceedings. Staff does that. So it's a case of east is east and west is west, and nary the twain shall meet. And that's what the current bylaw addresses, those 4 elements. And they're very clearly laid out. So anything else? Absolutely. Come and talk to you. Even if you're a member of the public and you're unhappy with the way staff have done something, you can come and delegate. We just had that with the Mary Street situation at Community Services, and now tonight. And there was a resolution about that. That's completely allowable. But those aspects, no, we have said that they are not to be delegated to in front of council. That responsibility has been given to the city clerk to determine when it comes forward. We say to the clerk, if it's one of these things, labor relations, staff performance, etc., then it may not come to council. And that's the determination that the clerk makes according to this procedural bylaw. So no, I won't be supporting this. I am supporting the status quo. It's a perfectly good piece of bylaw. We should stick with it. I'm not sure what else I can say, but I think we have to be mindful of the management union, management staff relationship, and we should be completely hands off of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor McConkey, good evening.
Good evening. I've been sitting too long. I think tonight is a perfect example of the fact that council should be able to make a choice. I tried to make a motion, left it up to you, Mayor Carter. You denied the opportunity for 2 speakers. In fact, in the end, what happened was an approval of a letter from one of those speakers that was denied the delegation. This on purple pages closed. This should be a public document now. Everything related to our development charges should be open to the public and council. If those people had been allowed to speak, we would have a little bit more insight into what's gone on here today. The public has no idea. In fact, when I was researching to see why we have such a convoluted procedural bylaw that doesn't allow council to make a decision on who gets to speak, I looked at the region's bylaw, and they have very clearly, I copied it to all of you, section 2.2 or 2.1, 2/3 vote, suspension of the procedural bylaw. Doesn't say anything only in this instance, not in that instance. It's very clear, one line. The council procedural bylaw can be suspended. You have to say why, and it's for a temporary period of time. We should put that back in. It was in this council's bylaw up until 2017. Why it was removed, I have no idea. But I would like to make a notice of motion tonight to put it back in. And again, tonight's a perfect example why this was a closed document. Speakers were disallowed, and then we come around and we put something through here. Public has no idea about development charges, which under the Planning Act, correct me if I'm wrong, City Manager?
We're speaking about this,
But
though.
that should
Let's
be
speak
public.
about this,
And this is all
1966.
about not doing stuff in the back room under the table.
I understand.
I'm sorry.
This-
Very
yeah.
passionate about this too tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to ask for clarification, Madam Clerk. The councillor had said that it changed in 2017, this specific thing about delegation of who is able to speak to labor relations, staff performance. Did that change in 2017?
Through the chair, it was part of this new procedure bylaw, and it was, at that time, the council asked for it to be put in. It was a practice
Yes.
where, when these items came in, they were forwarded to staff and members of council were copied. It wasn't codified in the actual bylaw.
Okay, so it was codified in 2017. Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Just to carry on with that, when the bylaw and the procedural bylaw was reviewed, was it compared to the regional bylaw?
Madam Clerk?
Through the chair, yes. Staff interviewed all members of council and asked them if there were elements of the region's procedure bylaw that they wished us to consider implementing in the new bylaw. Those suggestions were provided, and when we did the education and training session, we had feedback from council members. These were the elements that we put in. They didn't ask us to specifically put in the exact wording from the region's bylaw.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman?
But on the rest of the bylaw, we're different. Our procedural bylaw is different in many ways from the regional bylaw.
Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
That is correct.
And you said that this was in practice, and the council wanted it codified to be included in the procedure. So it was already being done for a number of years. Do you know how many years? Quite a few years?
Many years, but I could not go back and say specifically which year, but it was many years that was the practice.
And do you know, is this the practice? As Councillor Nicholson said, it wasn't the rule, but is this the practice at the region? Do you know?
I'm unable to answer that question.
You don't know? I know it is the practice at the region. Yes, it is. This is the practice at the region that they do there. These items do not come to council. Staff performance, ongoing legal proceedings, solicited visitation, and labor relations. They do not come to council directly by somebody wanting to make a delegation to council on these matters. It's a practice that the region does. So I won't support this revision. I think the fact that it had been being done, I think it makes sense. And the clerk doesn't make this decision by herself, sitting there and say, oh, geez, I think this falls into that. She talks to the legal department, talks to the city manager, whatever, depending on what the item is coming forward, whether it's staff performance, legal proceedings, solicitation, or labor relations, before the decision is made to say, it falls into that category, therefore under our procedural bylaw, it's not allowed, and then the message goes out to the people. And just for clarity, one of the people that wanted to come tonight is not the author of the letter that we got. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments in regards to it? Yes, sir?
So through you to the clerk. So if somebody made a motion to hear, the chair rules it out of order, somebody challenges the chair, the chair's decision is overthrown, and then did a motion to hear, they would need 2/3. Is that procedurally how it would work?
Madam Clerk?
So I need clarification. I'm sorry, Counselor. So you cannot waive that provision. So what you're saying is regardless if a motion was made to hear from a delegation?
So
Is that
what I'm
what you're
saying is
saying?
if somebody came forward and said, hey, I want to speak to you, and a member council gave a motion to hear, the chair, who's ever in the chair at the time, would say, I'm sorry, that's procedurally not allowed. Somebody challenges the chair loses. Would then just a 2/3 vote to hear work? Because we've always had the power that notwithstanding, wouldn't that be the way around it? But key is you would always need 2/3.
Madam Clerk?
If I may, the way around it is to remove that restriction from waiving the rules. And the
We've
council
always
would,
had that in the toolbox.
well, right now you can't.
So
That
under
provision
this-
can't be waived. If you remove that,
So now we
restriction,
can't-
then
we
you
don't
have
a
2/3.
notwithstanding-
That's
then that
correct.
would give you your 2/3 at that point by removing that clause to say that you cannot waive the rules to hear a delegation related to those sections.
Okay, thank you for helping me better understand the rule book.
Thank you. Okay, no other questions? Ready for the vote? All those in favor?
Recorded vote.
I knew it was coming. I was waiting for it. Counselor, I don't know who was first.
Mine was a tie, so I might have got in there under the wire, I don't know.
And so, Counselor McConkey, I'm gonna give it to her.
Councillor McConkey?
Yes.
Councillor Neal?
Yes?
Councillor Nicholson?
Yes?
Councillor Chapman?
No.
Councillor Guyberson?
Yes.
Councillor Gray?
Yes.
Councillor Hurst?
Yes.
Councillor Kerr?
No.
Councillor Marin Pietri?
No.
Councillor Marks?
Yes.
Mayor Carter?
No,
7 affirmative, 4 negative.
passes.
Carries.
Moving on. Counselor Hurst, Corp. 1960, parking. Now, I understand that we need a little bit of cleanup on this on item A. Is that correct?
That's correct,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, and I have an amendment.
Okay.
A recommendation. So I'd like to move the recommendation, but I have an amendment
have it?
available, if I can pass it around.
Right. So
Mr.
you
Mayor.
have the amendment, and the reason why you have an amendment is because this way that it's written at this particular time would take a great deal of money out of the city's pockets. Is that correct?
In a word, yes.
Yes.
But this is basically for
Okay.
clarification.
So if you
cleanup.
could
Thank
give
you.
it to our clerk, I'd greatly appreciate it, please. And who do you have as a seconder, please?
Oh, Councillor Nicholson, he
you very
participated
much.
in the original one, so we'll
Thank
just
you.
make this one
Okay, good.
forward. So would you like me to read so I move the recommendation.
Yeah.
However, I would like it to be amended to replace the bullet points in part 1 with the following. So it would be revised as follows, that the penalty increases between each tier be $20. Next point, the contraventions of the same parking offense that occur within 90 calendar days or less from the last contravention shall be subject to the next tier. And the final bullet would be that any subsequent contravention of the same parking offense that occurs 90 calendar days or less from the issuance of a Tier 3 penalty be subject to the Tier 3 penalty. And for clarification and for everyone to save some reading, that Tier 3 penalty is $80. So if within that 90 days, if you do it again, within that 90-day period, it's another $80. The fifth time, it's $80, et cetera, within that 90-day period.
So this is an administrative cleanup, I understand,
Yes.
because the other one was problematic. Is
It
that
was,
correct?
it was problematic, and this, as I said, is for clarification.
Right.
And
Okay.
it's the full intent of the original motion. Thank you.
Okay, so this is the amendment. Any speakers on the amendment? Counselor Nicholson?
So I wanted to thank Councillor Hurst for bringing the amendment through and bringing the policy through. Just want to bring your attention, Toronto's got a 3 strikes rule. your first 3 tickets go up, up, and up, and on the 4th time, they just tow your vehicle. We haven't got to that point yet, but I'm hoping this will send a message to those that think they can just park anywhere, that if this doesn't work, our only alternative would be to impound your vehicle.
Okay, all those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? That's carried. On the main, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, moving on. Moving now to DS. Councillor Kerr, DS 19115, 45 Prince Street.
Yes, I'm going to move the recommendation, but in...
It's already moved, so you can, go ahead, sir.
But in, as an additional piece of information and perhaps to allay Councillor Chapman's concern at the meeting about having a more definite idea of what's going to go up on the wall, I had a phone conversation with the owner, Andrew Holmes, owner of Fair du Nord, and he's had a meeting with Chad Tyson, who will be the primary artist, leading a team of artists to work on this piece. And the way it will look is that the mural on the side will be stylized outlines of the various kinds of clothing that Frere du Nord will make in their facility. And within the outlines of the piece of clothing will be images of Canadiana. And it's a Canadian company. One of those images may in fact be a stylized sewing machine because, of course, that's the nature of their business. But it will be a very Canadian mural. The outlines of the clothing will give an idea that it is a clothing company, and what goes on inside each of those pieces will be in the imagination of each artist who may be assigned, whether it's a pair of coveralls or a sweatshirt or whatever else they make. That artist in the creative team will fill that image with, or fill that outline with Canadiana images. So it's going to be a very classy piece. As we said, there's no obscenity, no profanity, and nothing that is publicly offensive. And I think it's going to be a real asset to the downtown and will exemplify what goes on within the business. So that's an idea of what will come forward. Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Let's move on. DS 19117, 291 King Street. Councillor Nicholson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to vote against this recommendation. I'm going to do so because I've consistently, in the last 3 decades while on this council, have opposed the destruction of our historical neighborhoods within Oshawa. I believe the delegation hit the nail on the head. The second you let one step of a block bust occur within the area, you've lost it all. Now, we went through this same process on Simcoe Street North from Adelaide to Roslyn. And we argued long and hard for a heritage district, and we argued long and hard that we should have prohibitions against commercial intrusion into that area, because eventually if you let one in, then you get a second one, then you get a third one, and before you know, everything is converted. And if you want to see how that works, I again draw your attention to Simcoe Street North, between Adelaide and Bond. What used to be a series of older homes that were beautiful, well kept, looked after, have been converted into real estate offices and dental offices and chiropractic offices and sales offices, to the point where it's a commercial district now, hiding within the outer limits of the residential building envelope. At some point in a city's history, you have to stand up and say, this is the line in the sand that we won't go any further. That there are certain historic neighborhoods that we're just not going to allow any further commercial intrusion into. I think Simcoe, from Adelaide to Roslyn, must be one of those. I think King, from Richardson to Wilson, must be one of those. And I would hope that rather than approving this tonight, that I've spoken, so nobody else, I can't do it, but somebody would refer this back with the direction to staff to look at the creation of a heritage zone or district along this stretch so that we can protect the heritage of our community. We had a massive fight, argument, discussion, what a better word, at a council meeting over a farmhouse that's set in isolation on Thornton's Road. And here we have a situation where we're going to basically convert an entire residential district to commercial intrusion. Which is with all due respect to our staff and to all the processes, I've always opposed these. I think they're wrong. We lost the Rundle House. We lost other properties that are around the hospital. We can't afford to lose this key part of King Street. And I draw your attention to one last conclusion. Please drive from Thornton's Road to Harmony Road along King Street. This block is the last block. It's the last one that survived in a residential character. Everything else has been commercialized. Enough is enough. Let's leave one part of the King's Highway, one part of our city's history, and say, no further east, no further west. We'll preserve this block.
Councillor Marin Pietri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to ask staff, have we, through you, Mr. Mayor, have we been at this in terms of a back and forth between the neighborhood and the people that are proposing the project and staff? And have we, gone through the process and revisited things and tried to, make things fit properly and work with Heritage Joshua on this as well?
Commissioner.
Through you, Mayor Carter, that's correct. Through any development process, there's a public meeting that's held. At that public meeting, there will be issues that potentially are raised, and we'll take that opportunity to work with the applicant to attempt to address those concerns. In this particular case, I approached the applicant's consultant and said to them that heritage matters were a concern to members of the public.
Yeah.
And that if they wanted to proceed, that it would be a good decision on their part to agree to a heritage designation. So as it's referenced in the staff report, that they have agreed to go through that process for a heritage designation for this site as opposed to an entire conservation district.
So this particular project could be a heritage designated site?
Through you, Mayor Carter, that's correct.
Okay. Have we heard from the previous owners that they're not opposed to it?
Through you, Mayor Carter, I'm sorry, could you clarify for the previous owners of
That property?
through you, Mayor Carter, I'm not sure if I've heard from the previous owners.
Yeah. And the current owners are okay with the proposal?
Through you, Mayor Carter, the current owners are in attendance this evening, and as I said, they've indicated that they have a willingness to proceed towards a heritage designation.
And Heritage Joshua is okay with that?
Through you, Mayor Carter, you would have to go back to Heritage Joshua for their input into this process.
Okay. All right, I just want to make some comments. I think following the process, it's been pretty clear that the previous owners, as well as these individuals who are proposing the project, have gone to great lengths to do what they could to satisfy not only staff, but also the community to the extent that you can. You're not going to, please everyone, but I think if you look at the adaptive reuse of the property and you consider the architectural features and you look at the design that's being proposed and the use itself, I don't see it being as invasive as maybe the uses across the street even, which are commercial. At this point, I believe that's the case, directly across from the street. Also, looking at the site, there's another house that's just next door to this, and it's bound by a road, like a street. So it doesn't continue on as, on Simcoe Street. You would have that continuum from, house to house to house to house without hitting a road until you get way down to the end near, I guess, the northerly portion. In this case, I do believe staff have worked well. The community has been heard. I know that not everyone's going to be happy with what the decision is at council, or maybe they will. Maybe council will turn this down, but I don't believe this is something that is a negative. I think it's a positive. We get to save a home on the street that would have otherwise maybe have gone to either disrepair or alteration where you wouldn't have had this level of renovation or adaptive reuse. So I think in considering all these variables, I'll be supporting the proposal.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Kerr?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question to staff. When I was on Heritage Oshawa, this item came forward, and I'm just, I think my memory must be not 100% on this. What's Heritage Oshawa's position on this particular property?
Commissioner?
Through you, Mayor Carter, the applicant had a pre-consultation with Heritage Oshawa, and at that point in time, my recollection was that they signed off on the development proposal.
And I think that was my understanding as well at the time. The facades can be completely maintained. The addition on the back, we use similar materials and colors, and Heritage Oshawa thought that it was an effective and adaptive reuse. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hurst?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the councillor representative on Heritage Oshawa, I'd like to affirm everything that's been said so far. The applicants did come forward to Heritage Oshawa and presented their case. And the original building that is there, they're going to maintain that. And the addition at the rear of the building is in keeping with refurbishment and quite complementary to the heritage aspects and the landscaping, et cetera, that's going around. Heritage Oshawa discussed it quite vigorously, and that the applicants are willing to consent to a heritage designation is a positive force for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Guyberson?
Did I put my hand up? I was thinking of putting my hand up.
Oh,
Anyways, sure.
no.
Yeah.
Listen, unless I'm starting
I
to
must
see
have.
things.
I
But
must
you
have,
did
'cause I was
put your-
thinking of
yeah,
doing it.
Unless
Okay.
you want like this.
It's possible. Anyway, I just would echo some of the last speakers on this particular item, but I do also respect the concerns of residents in the neighborhood, and my urging to them would be to seriously consider, and a question I asked when this first was before, I believe it was the Planning Act meeting, was to consider a heritage district. I think it would be a wonderful step. And if they are truly passionate about protecting the unique architecture along King Street in that area, then what better way to do it than to come together as neighbors and as a neighborhood and give that gift to the rest of the city for many, many years to come. And I think that this particular adaptive reuse is actually going to protect the heritage of the area, because if that larger property had been purchased with the intention to make the most amount of real estate dollars from it, then it could have meant the tearing down of the house and putting in a mid-rise there. And I think that the applicants have very, very clearly indicated their commitment to the character of the neighborhood. But again, being one of the ward councillors for this area, for any residents who this may reach, they're more than welcome to reach out to me if they need some direction and support on, and I'm sure that Councillor Kerr likewise and other members of council would be willing to help them enter that sort of a process. So
Okay.
I would hope that this isn't the end of this dialogue.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor McConaughey?
Thank you. I thought this was probably just going to be a slam dunk, that no one was going to speak because it looked to be a foregone conclusion. And then Councillor Nicholson steps in after going, on the other side on Thornton Road with another developer. And I think you referenced that heated debate a few weeks back. But I would like to know from staff, worst case scenarios, because right now we have an owner that's willing to put the heritage designation on it, but the big issue is the zoning. They're requesting a change of zoning. Right now, I don't think the zoning's appropriate for a multi-use apartment complex or anything like that. It's just strictly single-family residential, isn't it?
Commissioner, to the question, please.
Through you, Mayor Carter, the front portion of the property is currently zoned R1C, which permits only single detached dwellings. The rear of the property is zoned R2, and an R2 zone permits singles, semis, and duplexes. So the zoning bylaw amendment that is before you would amend the zoning on the property entirely to R1C, and then it would have a special exception which will allow solely a dental office.
So the special exemption solely for a dental office is why it went for the rezoning. The R1C, that's another issue. It's not being really, it couldn't have, you just wanted to make it all one zoning. Is that the reason?
Through you, Mayor Carter, it just made sense to make it all one consistent zone category.
Okay, so if this for some reason didn't pass tonight and it's R1 and R2, what could that be? Could that be demolished and someone say, I'm going to build what? Something
Commissioner?
without rezoning it,
So-
with that zoning?
Through you, Mayor Carter, the frontage on the property is about 37 meters. Minimum requirement in an R1C zone for frontage is 13 and a half meters. So theoretically, somebody could demolish the building and go through a process and put something else there. That's correct.
They could put more houses up, but they'd have to go to land division, just like further down on King Street, what they called the White House. There would be that whole scenario happen.
Through you, Mayor Carter, there would be a process to go through, whether that's land division or part lot control, but there would be another process to go through, yes.
So at this point, that special purpose, I think, for the dental office is probably the biggest concern because the conversion of the lot into a parking lot and the traffic, that's what I understand from the residents that have spoken to council and committee. But the worst-case scenario is, if this is not approved tonight, then there's no reassurance that it will be designated as a heritage dwelling, and it could conceivably be worse, with more houses, more dwellings on the lot, and this possibly being torn down.
Commissioner?
Through you, Mayor Carter, there's always an opportunity for redevelopment opportunities. There is a process that would need to go through that would include the region as the authority on King Street. So there are checks and balances that need to be maintained, but there's always opportunities for a development.
Okay, because this is a real tough one now because it is complicated in that I think it's the zoning for the dental office, but is there a more passive type of professional office that would fall within that special purpose?
Commissioner?
If it's rezoned and the dental office fails, I'm sorry to say that with the owners in the gallery, but say the next owner, because it will go through.
Through you, Mayor Carter, it would solely be for a dental office. You couldn't have, say, a psychiatrist or something like that.
So in perpetuity, it'll be for a dental office, nothing else.
Through you, Mayor Carter, I would prefer not to say in perpetuity.
Right, okay. But somebody else at a future date could come back and say they want to change the dental office into, I'm just wondering how protected it is and where we go if this is not approved, then there's no heritage designation on the house. There is currently, they still have to sign, it has to go through the newspaper and the public process for a heritage designation, right?
Commissioner?
Through you, Mayor Carter, that's correct. There would still be a process to go through engaging Heritage Oshawa and with the applicant. But as I've mentioned several times, the heritage designation process works best when you've got the Heritage Oshawa, the council, and the property owner all in lockstep.
But that is a condition of the approval of the rezoning.
Commissioner?
I wouldn't call it a condition. They've told us that they will agree to a heritage designation, but it's not really tied to the approval of the zoning bylaw.
So, I'm sorry, this matter, if it was sent back to committee, could we get that assurance?
Through you, Mayor Carter, I'm not sure how we could get that that assurance through the zoning process, other than, taking the applicant's word that they're agreeable to a heritage designation.
Do you have anything in writing that they're agreeing to the heritage designation?
We have an email from them.
That they're in agreement to designate the property heritage through the Heritage Act?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, seeing no other questions, recorded vote called by Councillor Pietri. Madam Clerk?
Councillor Pietri?
On the approval?
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Councillor Marks?
Yes.
Councillor McConkey?
No.
Councillor Neal?
No.
Councillor Nicholson?
No.
Councillor Chapman?
Yes.
Councillor Guyberson?
Yes.
Councillor Gray?
Yes.
Councillor Hurst?
Yes.
Councillor Kerr?
Yes.
Mayor Carter?
Yes.
8 affirmative, 3 negative.
Okay, that passes.